Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Luna and you're watching my channel Tierra y Luna. Today I'm going to be taking you through a step-by-step tutorial on how I painted these Nutcracker soldier masks. And if you saw my last video on the step-by-step tutorial on the Harlequin dolls, you would know that the dance studio that I work at is putting on our annual performance of the Nutcracker. Just like many studios, ballet companies, and everybody in the dance world is doing as well in this holiday season. But the reason that I'm creating these masks is because multiple dancers were cast in more than one role, so they couldn't wear the character makeup as well as be in the other roles that they're dancing in, because there just wasn't obviously time for that level of quick change and all that jazz. So our studio's solution was to have them wear character masks, and that's what I'll be showing you how I created today. And if you would watch that video, you would also know that I wish I had been able to gesso these before I started going in with my paint, because this material was not so great to work with. And if you've ever painted with watercolors and your paper has done that like pilling and just not being cooperative once you've overworked it, that's how this material was acting from the moment I put paint on it, and it was just very unpleasant. But because I was given these the night before the day they needed to go on stage, so the night before I had one day of turnaround time to paint these masks, so I did not think to gesso them because I didn't know if my gesso layer would dry before I could start painting them. And if you don't know what gesso is, it's what artists put on their canvases or other surfaces to prime those materials and surfaces for paint. And I definitely think it would have helped me immensely in painting these, but like I said, I just flat out didn't have the time. But it's okay, we made it work. They turned out fantastic anyways. So yeah, as you see here, I'm just adding my first layer of skin tone paint, because obviously no one is paper white, so we need to put our foundation layer, if you will. And another note on the material, I don't know if it was super visible here, but it would like puff up like a sponge when I was putting my like really watery layers on it. But if I didn't use a lot of water to dilute my pigment, the pigment would not go far at all. It's like the material just completely eats up the pigment if it's not diluted with a significant amount of water, and that was gonna eat through a lot of my paint. And so I went the route of heavily saturating these masks with water so that I wouldn't have to use as much pigment. But that was also probably a contributing factor as to why they were literally disintegrating as I was putting paint on them. And it was just really difficult to get a nice even layer. So I don't know what brand or what kind specifically, or even what material these masks were. I did not order them myself. But yeah, 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what this was, because I don't know. I had no information on what this actually was, but it was very hard to work with. So once my base skin tone layer is completely filled in, then I start going in and roughing in the eyebrows. And when I was making the shapes of these eyebrows, I wanted them to be very short and small and angular. And so that's what I was keeping in mind when I was painting these on. So they're thicker in the closer they are to the center of the face, and then they taper and off and thin out as they come to the outer part of the face, and they're cut very short, as you can see. And I'll also point out for these details, I'm using a square brush so that I can get really sharp edges on the outlines of the shapes. And now that the first eyebrow is done, it's time to go in and try and replicate that shape as best as possible on the second side. And to do that, I'm just getting a good idea of and looking at my mask from every angle so I know exactly where to line up my second side so that it matches my first side. And every time I see something that can be touched up, I just go ahead and touch that up on the first side. And if you peek in the background, you can see the works in progress that are the Harley Quinn dolls. Make sure to go ahead and give that tutorial a watch too if you're interested. I'll just go ahead and speed this up while I even out the sides. I just continually go back and forth from one side to the other and make them as close to the exact same shape as I possibly can get it. And as I'm painting the second eyebrow, I just continually lift up the mask so that I'm seeing it at the correct angle that the audience will be seeing this, because it's going to look a little bit different when I'm looking at it from top down while I'm painting it than it will while looking at it straight on. So I just go ahead and lift it, set it back down, readjust, lift, repeat. So because I'm painting 2 Nutcracker soldier masks today, I have to go in and do exactly what I just did on the second mask. And as you can see, I start by roughing in the thickest part of the eyebrow right in the center of the face. And then I take my brush and drag a line out towards the outer part of the face. And then I'll go in on the top and drag the line outward as well. And then connect to the 2 lines in a taper at the end of the eyebrow before I go in and fill in the entire shape. And then I just repeat the process on the second eyebrow. And I do the exact same thing to measure and line it up as I did on the first mask. I'll speed this up for us. So now I'm going to start painting on the blush circles on the Nutcracker masks that you typically see. And so I mixed up a nice light peachy pink and I start sketching out the size of the circles that I want for these masks. To get a nice edge on my circles, I'm using a lot of pressure on my brush and dragging it really slowly, letting the edge of the brush do the work to get that sharp edge for us. And then I just make small adjustments using that same process to create a crisp line on the edge until my circle has reached the size and shape that I want it to be. So a perfect circle and the perfect size. And now I just make the same size circle on the other side of the mask. I constantly turn the mask so I can view it from the right angle and get the perfect angle for making my edges super crisp. And then I just go ahead and adjust each side, making them as close to the same as I possibly can. So as the blush circles began to dry, they began to darken because oftentimes acrylic paint darkens lighter or dries darker than when you first put it on. So I didn't really like that, and so I went in and with a lighter pink just lightened up the circles just a little bit. But I also thought it would be cool to have a little bit of an ombre effect. So the top part of the circle that's closest to the outer part of the face, I just lightened the most with my lighter pink. And then I blended it into the darker pink underneath. And here you can see up close that ombre effect a little bit better. It's just a very soft. And you can also see how I'm cleaning up these edges and making them much more sharp and crisp. And then I just adjust the circles on each side until I see that they are the same shape, the same location on the face, and just have very crisp edges and look exactly the way that I want them to. Go in and do the exact same thing on the second mask. So now that the eyebrows and the circle blush patches are done, it's time to go in and add the mustaches. And I knew that I wanted a really curly, old style mustache for these, and I wanted them really bushy right up under the nostrils. So they're bushy, they taper out into the sides, and then get really thin on the curly cue. Bushy parts are on a steep angle upwards towards the nostrils as well. So they're steep angled and bushy. And like everything on these masks, whatever I do on one side, I have to replicate on the other side as best of my ability. So now I'm roughing in the shape that I just created on the second side. And that also brings me to another point. I don't go in and do the entire first side of the mustache before going in and doing the second side. I do parts of each side. So I'll go and do part of the first side, then replicate that part on the second side. And that helps me keep the best shape the same. It helps me keep the shapes the same as best as possible when doing these mirrored sides. So now that I got the bushy part of the mustache roughed in on both sides, I am gonna now start working on the initial part of the curl on the mustaches. And I'll just bring you in closer so you can better see what I'm doing here. And before I move on to the next segment of the mustache, I just make sure that I'm happy with both shapes on each side of the stache before I move on to the other segments. So to get the exact right curve that I want, I just make really short and quick little brush strokes, and I flick my brush as well. So I add more pressure when I'm first putting it down, the brush off quickly at the end of the brush stroke. So more pressure at the beginning, less pressure at the end, and short movements because I want to change the shape of the mustache little by little so that I don't make any dramatic change that I can't undo. And I just do this along the curve so that I get the exact curve that I want. And then once I get a shape and curve that I'm happy with, I take my brush and I apply a lot of pressure and slowly drag the brush along that curve so that it makes a really nice sharp line, just like we did with the curve of the circle. So lots of pressure, slowly dragging across that curve that I roughed in with these short brush strokes. So now that we have the rough shape on the first side, I will go ahead and clean that up later, but I just want to get the shape roughed in on the second side as well. So I'll go ahead and speed this up for us while I do that. Okay, now that the mustache is done, I'm going to start making the mouthpiece, so like the puppet piece that moves up and down. And I do that by first putting down a layer of just straight up red. And this red part is going to be a very large rectangle that goes about halfway down the chin as well as on top of the lips. So this very large red rectangle is what I'm painting in right now. So now I'm going to add the black lines to outline the part of the mouth where the puppet would move. So I'm going to draw a black line on the very edge of the part where I put the red down. So basically it's going to outline that first side, and I'm going to drag it all the way down the face past the red line. And then rinse and repeat on side 2. And now I'll paint a straight line from the one side of the black line that I just did to the other black line I just did on both the top and the bottom parts of the red lips. So once the lines on the top and bottom are drawn in black, I go in and draw a black line straight across the center of my red rectangle. And then as a little detail on the part of the lines where the middle line and the side lines meet, I just round out that corner of the red rectangle just to give it more of like a lip effect. And then I spent a lot of time off camera perfecting those lines and making them as crisp as I possibly can. And now I'm gonna go in and start painting in the teeth of the Nutcracker. So I start by painting in the 2 very most center teeth, and that's so that I can measure out the teeth so that each tooth gets the right and equal amount of spacing. And so I roughen those middle 2 teeth, and that also allows me to see how many teeth I'm going to be able to fit in this area. So I paint in those first middle 2, and then I start roughing in the other teeth in this row. And then I repeat that same process on the bottom. And I make sure that the top teeth and the bottom teeth line up the exact same as well. And I make my teeth very straight where they come together, and I round them at the top where they go into the gums. And then I just do that same process on every single tooth, top and bottom. And I will say, these teeth took me forever. Oh my goodness, they took so long to get even and clean and looking the same as each other, and it was just a long time. Each mask, so these 2 and the other 2 Harlequin dolls, they took me about 2 hours each from start to finish, and I definitely think I could have done them faster had I not had such rough material to be painting on, and if I had been able to, like I said in the beginning of this video, gesso them. But I just frankly didn't have the time to let each layer dry well enough between them, so yeah, it was just rough. I would have liked to have gotten these masks a lot sooner than I did, but I made it work and they turned out great. Now I'm just gonna do all of that again on the second mask, and yeah, here we go. I'll take this time now to explain that in the next couple of videos, I'm going to be launching a new series that I'll have on my channel called Speedpaint Storytimes, where I'll have my painting process going on in the background while I tell a story about my life. And the story that I'm going to be telling you is going to be a 2-part story. So the first part I'll be telling with the Harlequin doll process videos going on in the background. And then in the second one, I'll be using this video footage to tell the second half of that story. And I figured since I'm doing this project for the competition studio that I work at, I have a 2-part and 2 designs that I am making videos of. I figured it would be the perfect way to tell the story about the 2 competition dance studios that I danced for growing up at the beginning of my dance journey. Now, I danced at 3 competition studios, but I only competed at the later 2, and we'll get into all of those details in the next video. But yeah, I figured with doing a project for the studio that I work for, and it's a dance related and it's Nutcracker season, I figured I'd kick off this series on my channel with a dance story. So stay tuned for the next couple of videos. And as you can see with the masks side by side, I don't particularly care if the shapes are exactly the same from one mask to the other, but as long as they're as close to the same from one side of the individual mask as it is to the other side of that same mask, that's what's more important here. So within each individual mask, as long as the sides are the same shapes and mirrored right, that's what I'm happy with, because no one's going to be able to tell from one dancer to the other that these masks aren't identical, because they're hand painted and they're not supposed to be identical. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you learned something here today. And if you did, go ahead and like, subscribe, and turn your notifications on. And I hope you join me for the next few videos. Thank you for watching!